What's up, everybody? Today we're going to talk about sleep in video games and in game development. This is Game Develop Repeat. I'm your host, Chris, and as always, thank you for joining me. The first game that comes to mind when I think about sleep in a video game is actually not Stardew Valley. And for once, it's also not a Final Fantasy game. The game that I first thought of was Melatonin, which is oddly enough a game that does not include sleep. It is just about sleep. It's not a mechanic in the game, but you're kind of drifting through dreams that have sleep themes to them. And it's cool, but it's also very bright colored and probably not actually that good for playing before you go to bed. Nonetheless, it is an interesting game. Now, once we get past that surface level, I hate to admit it, I do think about Stardew Valley, and I do think about Final Fantasy VII, and we are going to discuss them. I'll hit one of them, then we'll talk about some other stuff, and then we'll hit the other. Final Fantasy VII has one element about sleep that stands out to me. There's a part relatively early in the game where a major thing has just happened, and you've gone from one place to another. Yes, I do still avoid spoilers, even for Final Fantasy VII. I'm talking about the original, by the way. You get to a point in the game where a lot has happened, and you end up in a nice little place where you rest at an inn. And there's a little powwow where everybody talks and gets together and recaps and just tries to get a grasp of what is going on. And I really like this use of sleep as a narrative device, as a moment of rest and consolidation and figuring out your next steps, as a moment of peace. It sort of has the feeling of those rest rooms in Resident Evil, where you can go and save with a tape recorder. There's this moment of, okay, we're gonna have to deal with all of this stuff, but for the moment, let's get our heads on straight. Sleep through the night, wake up tomorrow, feel okay. And this tends to be a more common thing in JRPGs. There's a moment in a few different JRPGs that I can think of where you go, okay, let's turn in for the night, though. This is also something you run into when reading The Lord of the Rings. There are moments where everybody goes, it's just time to rest. It doesn't matter that everything is burning down. It doesn't matter that all of these huge problems exist and that we're doomed. We're just going to rest. Sometimes for days, sometimes for months. And then now we're ready. Let's deal with everything. Now we're recuperated. That is a very cool angle. It's not a very cool gameplay angle, but it adds to the overall narrative in a very important and powerful way. The game doesn't feel like this relentless drive forward. And that's one thing that I hadn't explicitly noticed, but sometimes I'm playing a game and there's no moment of pause. There's no real human moment of like, let's take a step back. This doesn't need to be frantic. This doesn't need to be constant forward momentum. This can be a moment of rest. And I love that. And then you've got games that explore what's going on during sleep. You've got Nights into Dreams, if you remember this. I did not understand what the heck this game was when I was a kid. I was playing it on, I believe, Sega Saturn. It may have been a specific version of the game, but to be honest, it's not that important to me because I only want to mention the theme of you are a kid who goes to sleep and is diving and ducking around through this weird dream world and collecting things and fighting things, and the risk is that you can sort of wake up from your cool fantasy where you are a flying, I think it's a jester, like a clown. You can kind of wake up from that, and then you're just this little kid waddling around in this dream world, and you do not have long to become part of the dream world again. And if you wake up, right? Oops, there you go. You're kicked out of the dream world. You've lost this round of the game. Gotta wait until you do another round. That's a cool thematic implementation. Now, those games, I don't know why they pulled me in. I played them a decent amount. I'd have to revisit it to figure out why. I think the gameplay was just pretty good. Those games are doing something interesting that I haven't seen many other games do. I haven't really seen sleep used as a theme for the structure of the world that you're exploring in a way that almost implies a real life. It doesn't almost imply, it implies a real life going on the rest of the time, but you kind of just pop straight back into it afterwards, right? Like you end the run, you're back into it. There's no grand, epic, end of the world thing going on there. It's a very personal story about dreaming. And it doesn't make a lot of sense because it's all very dreamlike, but it's cool. Here's another one, Morrowind. This is going to be a very brief one. You can just kind of go to sleep anywhere in Morrowind, and you get to set a timer for how long you're going to sleep. It is a mechanism for controlling what time of day it is. It is also a method of leveling up. I think you have to sleep in a bed to level up, if I'm remembering correctly. But you can't sleep anywhere. You can wait anywhere. You can just, in the middle of nowhere, just wait. Am I correct on this? I believe I am. You can just go, I'll wait this long. I'll wait that long. And then some places you can sleep, and then you will level up. So you have to have the right place. But you can just stay awake indefinitely and not really get any debuffs. Speaking of debuffs, sleep as a status effect is a whole nother conversation, right? Where you can wake up if you get hit, but otherwise you're asleep. Or you remain asleep through multiple hits. This is more of a turn-based game mechanic. It can be a very frustrating thing if your character falls asleep at the wrong time because somebody lulls them into it, tricks them into falling asleep. I don't have that much to say on the status effect version of it, though I imagine there's an interesting conversation to have. I haven't figured out what it is yet. And now, finally, Stardew Valley. I like the implementation of sleep in Stardew Valley. There's one specific detail about it that I really like, which is that if you can stay up late. Go ahead. Stay up way too late. You're going to pass out. A doctor's going to have to get you. Maybe. and well, it depends. If you pass out in the mines, right? But like if you pass out on your own farm, I think you just wake up in your bed exhausted. I'm pretty sure. But there is this thing of you can push too far and you're going to not have as much energy the next day and your health is going to be all messed up and it's going to be a problem. But you can if you want to. It just enforces a bedtime. A daily bedtime. And that is interesting to me. It's very interesting that Stardew Valley has a built-in routine that your character is always following. You will wake up at the same time every day. And yes, you can wear yourself out. Yes, you can get to the point where you have no energy to do any work whatsoever. But if you sleep at the appropriate time, you get all your energy back. If you don't sleep at the appropriate time, you're done. It doesn't matter how much you wear yourself down. As long as you get enough sleep, you're good to go. I mean, it's not true, but I like that implementation as just a statement about overworking yourself. I like that idea as, oh, by the way, you gotta sleep. It's mandatory. It is something you have to do, otherwise you cannot do anything. Because I think that is something that people who people like me struggle with. I struggle with, okay, I have to get to bed or else I'm screwed for tomorrow. And Stardew Valley gives you a very visceral implementation of that. It's like, no, seriously, you're not doing anything. Like, yeah, sure, you can wake up the next day and do this for energy and that for energy and whatever, but it wasn't worth it. Like, it's never really worth it to have your character pass out. Actually, there might be some weird speedrunning trick where it is, but you get the idea. Through the course of normal play, it's not worth it. Speaking of trying to be too productive and not getting any sleep, let's talk about game development. There's some weird cultural things around sleep and work. Creative work included in this picture. There are times when you hear a story about the games industry about people sleeping under their desks because they don't have time to commute back and forth from home and spend time with their family and whatever. So they're just eating fast food, sleeping under their desk, waking up, programming, going to sleep, waking up, programming, going to sleep, right? This is not a sustainable thing. This is you playing Stardew Valley and passing out at the end of every day, chugging coffee to get energy, and then continuing doing what you're doing, chugging more coffee to get energy, so on and so on and so on, passing out again because you stayed up too late again, and so on, or just not sleeping at all. And it is not great. There are times when crunch is probably necessary, but you, as a person creating things on your own, probably don't need to do it to yourself. And am I talking to myself? Yeah. Yeah, I am. Because I got a little more sleep, and then when I was creating stuff, it felt better. Imagine that. When I was doing a little bit of music, it felt better. I understood it better. I was able to transcribe things more easily. For those of you who don't know, transcribing is listening to music and then playing it and writing it down. And I use transcription not just for writing it down, but for playing things by ear. I use the term kind of interchangeably there, as some people do. I'm not the only one who does that. So I was able to listen to music and play it on a trumpet, change the key, play it in another key. I was able to do things that normally are kind of difficult for me just because I had gotten enough rest and had eaten the right food. And I was like, man, how much is this affecting my retention of concepts when trying to do game development? How much is this affecting my attempts to be creative? How much does lack of sleep or just poor quality sleep cause me to feel like I can't do a thing or feel like I have no ideas or not be brave enough to start putting the first word down on a blank white page? How much existential angst comes from lack of sleep? Why not just do the Lord of the Rings thing and go, look, there's a lot of problems here. There's a lot of stuff that we have to deal with. The whole world is going to collapse, but not tonight. It's not collapsing right now. And frankly, we have some time to get ready to make sure that we can do everything we need to do to keep it from collapsing. So let's get the most comfortable rest of our lives. Let's forget about all these other things. And once we get to the point where we're ready, we're not going to want to do it maybe, but it's going to be time. Let's recognize that time and go out on this journey. That is a nice thing to do. And then combine that with the Stardew Valley thing of you got to do something every day. You got to work on it every day. You've got all this energy, might as well use it. You got to go to bed every day in time. Otherwise, you're waking up exhausted. You're passing out on the spot. This is huge. For me, this is a gigantic thing. I struggle with it because I always feel like I haven't done enough of the things that I love doing. especially working a job that is intense in terms of hours and physical exhaustion. There are days where I work 10 hours doing hard physical tasks. And then I come home and I go, well, I don't have it. It's time for a nap. And there are days when I work 10 hours doing hard physical tasks and I go, man, I have an idea. And I go into it. I would like to do the exciting stuff every day, but sometimes I don't have it. Sometimes you gotta get together with everybody at the end and go, okay, where are we at? What do we have in front of us? What do we need to do? And then have a night's rest, wake up the next morning, continue getting it ready, figure it out, and then move on and continue with the journey of creating whatever you're creating. As a side note, I think it's easy to get stuck in that portion of looking at what you have to deal with and trying to create a plan and then just going, oh, but the plan isn't perfect. The plan isn't ready. This isn't good enough. We don't know everything that we have to do. Let's sit here in this comfortable place until we know every single detail of the plan. And the presentation of this in Lord of the Rings, which I'm drawing a lot from right now, is a pretty inspiring presentation. The presentation of this problem in Lord of the Rings is essentially, there's a lot of stuff that we have to deal with. We don't know how we're going to do it, but here's the path that we're taking. We are going this way. And even sometimes this is the first step that we're taking. And while we're in that step, we're going to have a few days before we have to make this next decision. So we'll think about it a little bit on the way and we'll gather some information. But right now, it's time to go. I like that. I had an interesting conversation with somebody a while back about fiction, reading fiction. And their opinion was essentially, I don't read fiction because it's not useful. Their opinion was I read things that are useful. I want to learn skills from what I'm reading. I want to learn useful knowledge in life. I tried to present the perspective that I really like and have heard elsewhere of fiction is useful, although that is not the reason to go into reading it. You learn so much from exploring other people's stories. You learn so much from the deeper messages tucked away inside of the fiction. You get somebody's experiences and perspectives and philosophical beliefs, not just as an abstract theory that somebody's presenting to you using logical language and so on. You get a full metaphor of the entire thing played out in reality. I just read a book called Narcissus and Goldmund by Hermann Hesse, and this is much more philosophical fiction. Hermann Hesse's stuff tends to be very slightly spiritual, religious, not even slightly. It tends to be spiritual and religious and deeply philosophical, but also very deep on the creative and artistic side. So I just read this book. Just finally finished it. I've been reading it very slowly for a while. And it presented perspectives on art versus, not really versus, but I'm going to say versus, on artistic thought as compared to logical thought. And presented perspectives and illustrated perspectives that I have not otherwise understood or would not have otherwise understood if they were not steeped in this entire novel of a character's experience and emotional depth and pain and all of these other things. And then towards the end, there's this other guy who goes, hey, this is kind of how you view the world, and this is kind of how I view the world. And at that moment, I was ready to understand that. I was ready for that to click into my brain. And what I'm getting at, I apologize. What I'm getting at is the metaphors that we run into in fiction and in games are effective lessons. They teach us something, and you can easily disregard the elements of it that don't matter to you, and you can deeply internalize the elements that do matter. And this is part of why I'm always talking about something in a game as it relates to real life. Sorry about that beep if you just heard it. I'm interested in those things. And I feel that the metaphors and the journeys that you see in a game can relate to you very strongly, in much more interesting ways than just somebody saying like, oh, well, it's important to rest. Like, yeah, it's important to rest. I get it. Fine, whatever. But I've heard that advice a million times, and it wasn't until I started reading Lord of the Rings and experienced the times that the hobbits were resting and the context under which they were resting and the beautiful narration of how relaxed they got and how comfortable it was in contrast with the world around them and the other things going on. It wasn't until I experienced that I was like, oh, maybe I should rest more. And I hope that makes sense to you. If not, maybe read Lord of the Rings. I don't know. I wish I could look for books based on themes like that. Like, I wish I could search for books and be like, give me books about sleep. Give me books about creative productivity. But then we're reading a book for the sake of its like productive lessons, and then you're going in it from a whole different angle, and you lose the whole effect of it. You lose the whole metaphor, and maybe not. Maybe you can still get lost in it anyway. Regardless, sleep in video games, very cool. I'm a big fan of the way that it gets depicted. I would like to dig deeper into this sort of thing one day. I wonder, there's probably many, many examples of this that I missed. Like, for instance, if you sleep in a tent, it has this effect, versus if you sleep using a cottage, it has this effect, right? In like some Final Fantasy games, or games that give you a debuff if you stay awake for too long. Not just the raw mechanics, but the whole vibe around it. I would like a game that makes it harder to control your character the longer you're awake. That seems like a fun thought experiment. Speaking of thought experiments, if you had to incorporate sleep into your game, how would you do so? Whether it be as a game mechanic or as a story beat, what would be your implementation? And I want you to get as literal about this as you can, if possible. So rather than saying, oh, I would kind of have it do this thing or the other, maybe write out like a little bit of a draft implementation, or not. Go as deep as you want to. But that is everything that I have for you this week. As always, thank you for joining me. Get out there, make some stuff, and have fun with it. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.